And now, today's featured speaker is the Pulsifer Career Development Center's Job Search Strategist, Kim Andrews. Kim is an accredited business etiquette consultant certified by the Protocol School of Washington. A graduate of Boston College, Kim has over 20 years of training and coaching experience and served as the Director of Training at John Hancock Investment Management. Since 2012, Kim has worked with corporate clients and in higher education and is currently, as I mentioned, a job search strategist at Bentley University, helping both alumni and graduate students navigate their job searches and create successful career outcomes. We are so lucky to have her. Without further ado, please join me in virtually welcoming Kim Andrews.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today to discuss strategies for at-home job seekers. You know, in times of uncertainty when the ground beneath you feels a little shaky and you're unsure of how to find your footing, I think the best way forward can often be to come back to the things that you know are true, the things that have always worked, and the things that you feel most certain of. So the suggestions I'm going to make today are based on some of the principles of job searching that I'm most sure of. The strategies that I can confidently say will serve you well in any environment, even the very challenging one we find ourselves in today. What I'll be offering up then is what I'll call a focus four areas where I think you can direct your attention and energy in the days to come. And if you do that, if you really do focus your effort in these four general categories, I feel confident that not only will you see positive outcomes in your job search, but you'll also find a little more joy in the process. So my focus four are: number one, reflect on and embrace what you do best. Number two, expand your knowledge and skill set, especially through online learning. Number three, continue to nurture your network. And number four, don't make assumptions, but be curious. You're welcome to jot down notes as we go through each of these categories, but I want to let you know at the outset that there will be a resources page emailed to all participants after our session that will reference all the suggestions I make in each of the four focus areas. So please don't feel like you have to capture everything. I'll be moving through the material fairly quickly. And with that, we'll start with focus area number one. Reflect on and embrace what you do best. In any job search, it's important to set yourself apart from other candidates. Self-awareness is key to telling your story in a powerful way. Your professional experience and background are part of what makes you unique, but those are the things that you've done. What can be incredibly compelling to hiring managers is to really have the language and vocabulary to talk about who you are, what makes you unique, and how your strengths will allow you to make contributions to a company or organization. So as a starting point, I suggest setting aside some time for self-reflection. And that can mean sitting down with a journal, or it can happen while you're out taking a walk. Make a list mentally or on paper of all the things that have made you good at what you do throughout your career. And then think more broadly about the universal strengths that you have across all areas of your life. The things that make you a good friend and family member, that lead you to the hobbies and volunteer opportunities you take on. One of the greatest tools you can use when it comes to finding language and vocabulary to capture your unique qualities is the Clifton Strengths Finder. This online assessment asks a series of questions and then gives you a list of your top strengths, along with rich and compelling descriptions that you can use to talk about your strengths on a resume, a cover letter, LinkedIn profile, or in interviews or networking conversations. I highly recommend trying StrengthsFinder. The baseline assessment costs a little under $20 and can be a great way to help you really zero in on what you do best. Another thing that can be helpful is an assessment tool called Career Leader. It's a bit more tactical than StrengthsFinder, but will identify from the pattern of your interests, skills, and motivators what careers, job roles, and organizational cultures may work best for you. If you're thinking about a change of direction in your career, Career Leader can be a great tool to help you hone in on where you might find the best fit. As you round out your self-reflection, I also suggest enlisting friends and family to help remind you of your greatest strengths and gifts. I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time finding things to talk about today, other than what's in the news, which can feel really heavy, because none of us are really doing much besides staying at home, and there aren't really stories to tell or adventures to recount. So I think this is a great time to be able to say to friends and family, as a part of my job search process, I'm really trying to get clear on what I have to offer potential companies and trying to find ways to set myself apart. I'd love to ask for your help and observations. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions about how you see me? And then you're welcome to ask me questions if you'd like. On the resources sheet, I share these suggested questions, but they can be things like, what are 3 adjectives you'd use to describe me? When and where have you observed me being most engaged in my career? Can you remember a time when I expressed deep satisfaction in a given task or role? When do you witness me at my happiest, either professionally or personally? When do you notice that I get frustrated, either professionally or personally? What would you like to see me try that I've never done before? You may be surprised at some of the answers you get, and it really may help to focus your efforts when it comes to sharing what makes you the best candidate for a job. One of the great things about going through this process of self-reflection is that it will help not just in your job search, but also in the time before you find your next career opportunity. If you know what your greatest strengths are, you can find ways to put them to use through formal volunteer opportunities, or just by making a contribution to the lives of those around you. I'll give you an example from my own life. My top strength is empathy, which means that I'm a really good listener and I have the gift of intuition. So I can sense the way people around me are feeling and can listen to them deeply in a way that makes them feel heard and seen and known. By the way, my empathetic capability means that this webinar format is really difficult for me because I'm interacting with you all without seeing your faces or body language. I can't read your energy or see how you're responding to what I'm saying. But because I know myself and my strengths, I could anticipate how this would feel for me and came into the situation prepared. Though I use my empathy in my job every day, I am also finding ways to put it to use outside of work. I'm reminding myself to reach out to friends and family one-on-one and listen to how they're feeling, because we're all struggling with challenges that we're facing right now. And we may assume our struggles are the same as someone else's, but my empathy allows me to really listen to each person's unique experience and to let them feel heard and understood. Sure, that isn't formal volunteer work, but it is me being intentional about how I put my gifts to use during this difficult time. And that makes me feel good and it fills me with purpose. So now that we've discussed how to reflect on and embrace what you do best, let's move on to focus area number 2. Expand your knowledge and skill set, especially through online learning. We live in a time when learning opportunities are almost limitless. If you're currently unemployed and find that you have time to devote to expanding your knowledge and skill set, there are thousands of options to explore. These opportunities will not only expand your capabilities, but they'll allow you to talk to hiring managers about what you were able to accomplish during a time when you had to take a pause in your career. You can start with sites like YouTube and search for any number of topics. I also highly recommend LinkedIn Learning, where there are courses and learning paths devoted to topics all across the professional spectrum. Note that you can purchase LinkedIn Learning a la carte, You don't have to have a premium subscription, though it is included in LinkedIn Premium. A monthly subscription is under $30 a month, unless if you commit to a year subscription. It's worth mentioning that the courses that you take through LinkedIn Learning are populated to your profile, so employers can see what you've been doing to augment your knowledge base. Additionally, there are sites like Coursera and edX with robust offerings, and universities that are offering online and in-person certificate programs. I think it's worth mentioning that if you are considering making an investment in a certificate or master's program, I highly recommend spending time to be really clear on your vision for what that program will help you accomplish in your career, and speaking with people in your network who might be able to give you insight about what opportunities that degree or certificate may be able to unlock for you. Bentley has a 3-course certificate program that is listed on the resource page that may be worth checking out if you're considering going this route. One area that I highly recommend exploring in the current environment is remote work and remote interview skills. Because so many companies have had to implement remote work protocols, hiring managers want to know that you have the capabilities to navigate all the tools and platforms that make remote work possible. You may want to focus some of your learning on being comfortable and adept in remote work environments, even if you didn't make the transition in a prior role. You can find plenty of online learning modules for platforms like Zoom or Skype, Teams or Slack. Because all interviews are taking place virtually right now, it's helpful to up your virtual interview game. One of the ways to do that is by using a site called Big Interview, which is a free tool for all Bentley alumni. Big Interview allows you to practice virtual interviews and provides insight and intelligence on the best way to optimize your performance. It's important to feel comfortable in the virtual environment so you can be confident in the moment and focus on making a connection with the interviewer, even if you're not meeting in person. Nonverbals are such a big part of making a connection in an interview, and that looks and feels different in a virtual interview. You have to remember to do things like making eye contact with the camera, getting your lighting and sound quality right, remembering to have good posture and dress appropriately. Practice is key for online interviews, and there are some additional tips in the articles that I share on the resources page that will be sent to you. Note that YouTube and LinkedIn Learning and many other sites have content with tips on virtual interviews, and it's worth spending some time reading up on this topic to be as prepared as possible for the virtual interviews, which are, at the moment, the only way that hiring managers are able to assess candidates and make staffing decisions. All in all, my message with online learning is that anything you pursue that keeps you in the process of learning is helpful and marketable when it comes to a job search. Learning capability itself is a skill that's in high demand with employers. So being able to show how you've grown and expanded your knowledge during this time can be incredibly powerful. With that, we'll turn to focus area number 3, continue to nurture your network. As a job search strategist, I've been lucky enough to witness and be part of many, many Bentley alumni's job searches. And again, I see the same common thread in the most successful job searches, which is that the more focus a job searcher puts on leveraging their network, the more fruitful their search is. The data tells us this is true, as somewhere between 80 and 85% of jobs are said to be filled through networking or some kind of warm connection. We know that networking works, but many people are reluctant to do it in this environment. They fear that reaching out to people will be an imposition, or that no one will be willing to step in and have a conversation when there's so much uncertainty and upheaval going on. I would counter that by saying that I think the desire people have to continue to feel connected with others is so incredibly strong right now, and the desire to be helpful in a time when so many need a little help can really make others open to having conversations that they may not have had a few months ago. No one is feeling particularly secure at the moment, and none of us know when we might need our professional network. So I think most people are really open to making new connections and reestablishing old ones. When it comes to networking, LinkedIn is the most powerful tool you have, now more than ever. I recommend spending some time with your LinkedIn profile to make sure it's as strong as possible. Does your headshot look professional and do you have a customized banner photo? Does your headline create a strong brand for you and highlight your capabilities? Have you written an about section, preferably in first person, using some of your greatest strengths, the things that we talked about in focus area number 1. Your about section is like an elevator pitch, and it's a great opportunity to tell someone who you are and what value you have to offer them. Be sure the descriptions under your experience section are robust and include lots of keywords that may show up in the types of job descriptions you're interested in. Add skills, accomplishments, licenses and certifications, volunteer work, and interests. Commit to an hour to spend updating your LinkedIn profile. And again, remember that there are plenty of videos and online content with tips for creating impactful profiles. Once your profile is updated, challenge yourself to reach out to new people every day. Send customized invitations to connect with new contacts. And be sure to give some context for how you found that connection. Send personalized messages just to check in with existing connections and see how they're weathering the storm. Think about posting content or reacting to articles that seem helpful or insightful given the current circumstances. If you have an area of expertise, consider writing and publishing your own LinkedIn content. This signals to connections and potential employers that you're an expert in your field and allows you to stand out. On the resources page, there is a how-to on publishing your own unique content to LinkedIn. I've heard success stories from people reaching out to other Bentley alumni who work at companies that they are targeting in their job search and doing a virtual coffee conversation via Zoom, or just having a 20-minute phone call to connect and ask questions and listen. That kind of connection is easier for some now that they're working from home and may be able to carve out 15 to 20 minutes that they may have otherwise spent commuting. These conversations should be informational and can include questions like, how did you get your start at the company? How have things shifted in the current environment? What are the greatest challenges at the moment? What are the areas of the greatest opportunity? What are you excited about for the future? This is all about connecting with someone and really tuning into their experience and needs. It isn't about asking for help or for someone to pass your resume along to HR. Although once the connection is established, they may want to help you. The purpose of these conversations is connection itself. I recommend asking for the name of someone else you might reach out to at the end of the call. You can say something like, "It's been so helpful to hear your insights today. Is there anyone else you can think of in the telecom space who it might be helpful for me to speak to?" By asking for a referral, you'll create your next opportunity for connection and generate movement and ripples in your network that can often yield unexpected opportunities. To find potential connections to reach out to, you can use the LinkedIn search filters under the People section. I recommend starting with Bentley alumni who work at the companies you may be targeting or are interested in. Connect with these folks and just ask. You never know where the conversation may lead. Which leads us to focus area number 4. Don't make assumptions, but be curious. One of the most critical and often overlooked components of a successful job search is mindset. Often I experience this with people who don't even know that they're sabotaging their own efforts by making faulty assumptions and drawing conclusions. Right now, it might be easy to say that no one's hiring, that no one wants to talk to you or help you because everyone's too busy dealing with their own circumstances. It might be easy to say that even if you find a new opportunity and do all the work to explore it, you run the risk of having the position frozen or the offer rescinded. You could assume that you won't be able to really make a good assessment of a company anyway, even if you do get an offer, because everything's being done virtually. So how could you ever know if this will be a good fit for you? When you start making assumptions, you leave possibility out of the equation, which kills any opportunity that may present itself. It's natural to have questions, and it's natural to be uncertain. But if you can change your mindset to one of open curiosity instead of closed assumption, you may find outcomes that surprise you. There are companies hiring robustly. There are new employees being onboarded and trained virtually. There are people making well-informed decisions about company culture and overall fit who feel excited about their future at a new organization. So I suggest taking a stance of curiosity, being open to asking someone for time to talk. Let them tell you if they don't have capacity. If so, don't take it personally and move on to the next opportunity. There are plenty of websites and articles focusing on particular areas of opportunity in the job market today. I've included them in the resource page that you'll receive. Note that crowdsourced sites like candor.com, which has a list of companies that are hiring, freezing, or laying off workers, may not always be completely reliable. So be curious when reviewing information on those sites as well. Overall, with an open mindset and a sense of curiosity, you're able to be more available to the opportunities that come along. And that concludes our overview of the Focus 4 strategies for at-home job seekers. I want to let you know that there are a few additional resources on the list that you'll be receiving by email. Sites that may source contract work if you're open to it. Places like the Massachusetts Councils on Aging that run Zoom meetings weekly to help job seekers who are 50 plus. And a list of resources for folks who may be returning to work after an extended family leave. I hope these resources will be helpful to you. And I also want to let you know that all alumni are entitled to a half-hour job search strategy session. If you'd like more information on that, you can visit bentley.edu/alumni/career. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to share this time with you today. And as I said as we started our discussion, I hope these strategies will give you some sense of certainty and the sensation of having solid ground as you navigate your at-home job search. Thank you for being here. And with that, Emily, I'd love to open the floor to questions.
Great, thank you, Kim. That was great. We are, just as a reminder, as both Kim mentioned and Bethany has put in the chat box, we're going to be sending out the list of resources along with a recording of today's session. So definitely keep that in mind. But we will now open up some questions. Let's start with one that was asked in the pre-registration process. So this question comes from an alumnus from the class of 1988. What is the best way to get past the initial online HR filters and be seen by hiring managers?
Yeah, so the very first step that we recommend that people take is to customize any resume that you send to potential hiring managers or recruiters. So realizing that this means that you may have to send fewer resumes, but the customization is key. And when you're thinking about customization, the place where it really makes a difference is taking the job description and lining it up against your resume and making sure that there are lots of words in common. And so you want to, the job description is telling you what the hiring manager wants, and you want to be able to show them, even in their own language, back to them that you have what they're looking for. There's also a great site, and it's not on the resources page, but it's called JobScan, so jobscan.co. And that allows you to take your resume and upload it onto the site, and then upload the actual job description that you may be looking at, and it will tell you how well you're going to do versus the ATS, the applicant tracking system. So I do recommend, and I believe that JobScan offers at least one free sample upload. So I really recommend giving that a shot if you want to see how well you're doing with lining up your resume versus the job description.
Great, another tip. So again, that was JobScan. All right, here's another question from an alumna, class of 2005. What are the best ways to expand your network without being able to meet people face to face?
Yeah, so I think, I mentioned it as I was sharing some of my thoughts. LinkedIn, has been and now continues to be even more so the platform of choice for being able to connect with people. I gave some suggestions for how you might be able to find people through the filters. I think, joining some groups on LinkedIn can be helpful to find other folks who might be open to having you reach out to them. Bentley alumni are your built-in network. So reaching out to other alumni, even if they're, whether they're at a company that you're interested in, even if they're in a different department or role, just reaching out to them and having the conversation and hearing what their experience has been. And as I said, asking that one additional question, who else do you know that I can talk to? I think, there are other networking opportunities out there, joining professional associations, going to events. In the world today, many of those opportunities now are sort of dried up. So really the tool of choice would be LinkedIn right now.
And that's a great plug for our Bentley community on LinkedIn. We have lots of alumni on there who are having conversations every day, and we will continue to highlight different alumni who might be in industries or at companies who are hiring to support all of your at-home job searches. Next, we'll take a question from our live Q&A. So this question is, do you recommend listing the topics you're learning on your resume? So for instance, if you're taking one of these online courses, how best highlight that on your resume?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So particularly if the course you're taking results in a skill. So I do recommend that all resumes have a skills section for folks who are, sort of mid-level in their career. Their summary statement can have a areas of expertise or skills section right up at the top of a resume. For some folks who may be newer graduates, they may choose to have a technical skills or skills section more towards the bottom of their resume. This is all very dependent on the role itself, your job area. But either way, I think listing those courses that you're taking, particularly if they result in a certificate, and putting that on your resume can be fantastic. LinkedIn also has, even if you're not taking, I mentioned earlier that LinkedIn learning courses will pre-populate to your profile. LinkedIn also has a section, a subsection under the accomplishment section that allows you to list courses that you've taken. So putting it in your LinkedIn profile in addition to your resume, and it sort of is I think you have to decide based on the robustness of the course whether or not you want to put it on your resume. Remember that anything you put on your resume is fair game for a hiring manager to talk to you about. So if it was a really few hour commitment, you may not be able to speak as an expert to that topic, then maybe you think about adding that to your LinkedIn profile and not your resume. But if it's something that is, has required a lot of effort and you've spent a lot of time on it, I think putting it on your resume is a great idea.
Great, we'll take another live question Is there a specific, this might be a little specific, but is there a specific resume format that you recommend? You know, I know there's different schools of thought for one page versus multiple pages. What do you think, Kim?
Yeah, there are absolutely different schools of thought. We do have an alumni resume guide that you can find on our alumni website, which has a lot of great templates, so examples, which I think are sometimes the best way to inform your decisions when it comes to resumes. I will say, I think whether it's a one-page resume, a 1.5 page or 2-page resume can very much depend on the extent of your experience. So for me, it's if you have, you know, under 7 years experience, I probably still want to see a 1-page resume. Maybe 7 to 10 or 12 years experience, I want to see a 1.5 pages. Once you get up over, you know, 12 or 15 years, then I think it probably warrants a 2-page resume. But there are a million variations within those sort of ranges that I gave that may, you know, change the way that you approach it. I think the approach varies by industry. So there are some industries that would really prefer to see a 1-page resume, and some where a 2-page resume is, you know, you sort of need all of that to capture your experience and skills. So, you know, I would say reference the alumni guide. Remember that you do have access to a half-hour job search strategy session with me. So if you'd like someone to take a look at your resume and give you feedback, that's something that I'm able to do. And then also, I think, you know, it always helps with resumes because there can be so many different answers. So people get frustrated sometimes because they say, oh, I'll talk to one person and they'll say one thing, and I'll talk to somebody else and they'll say another. For me, I think you, as the writer of the resume, probably can get in the head of the hiring manager better than an outside, you know, somebody who's helping you from the outside. So if you really just spend a little time and try and get inside the head of the person who might be looking at your resume and sort of making decisions about it, and think, what does this person want? What are they looking for? And is a more succinct and tailored and hard-hitting, precise resume, does that speak to that person? Or do they want more? Do they want the full extent of all that I've done? And really, I think it all comes down to trying to think from the hiring manager's perspective.
Great. Another question that's sort of related to resumes and has come in both in the registration process and live today is about how is the best way to explain layoffs in a resume or in an interview process?
Yeah. So I think it has probably never been easier to explain a layoff than right now, because so many people are experiencing layoffs. There are so many people who are currently unemployed. I think I would take, you know, I sort of feel like I recommend taking the approach of being informative, but not focusing too much on the layoff. And so I think sometimes people feel like they need to over-explain it, right? So what I would say is, you don't need to say anything on your resume about a layoff. You list the date range of your employment and you sort of leave it at that. For some people in a cover letter, they like to address a layoff. Perhaps I would suggest in the last paragraph of a cover letter. I think you sort of want to address it in a very factual way, which is, like millions of other Americans, my position was eliminated during the downturn due to the coronavirus pandemic. And if you have some information about the number of total layoffs or percentage of total layoffs that occurred at your company, that can be helpful. If there is any language that you can share about why your particular role might have been considered to be eliminated, that will give some context. Mentioning that briefly, I think, can be helpful. But on a cover letter, I don't think you need to do much more than that. In an interview, I think one of the great things you can do when it comes to tackling layoffs is, again, share in a very straightforward way that the layoff occurred, and then share what the experience has enabled you to do. So, I was part of a layoff that reduced the staff at my company by X%. I'm incredibly grateful for the time that I've had because of that layoff to reevaluate what I'm really looking for, and to spend some time, maybe doing some of the things that we talked about today, getting, being a little more sure of my direction, enhancing some of my skills. What I learned through the process of this layoff is, and then maybe sharing some of your insights, and that can even be something like, I know in future positions, and when I find myself in my next role in my career, I really want to focus on being sure that I'm someone who is inexpendable, or talking about how it has sort of reinvigorated your the efforts that you're going to make in your next role, because now you realize how important it is to really make a contribution. So I think anything that you can share that focuses on some of the positive things that have come from a layoff can be the best way to talk about it in an interview. I would certainly not recommend including it on anything for LinkedIn. I don't think it belongs in an about section. Again, it will be reflected in your dates of your experience section, but that would be just about it.
Thanks, Kim. What about someone who might be thinking about a job search on furlough as a slightly different perspective?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how excited you are to return to your position should it continue, right? Should, at the time that your furlough ends, do you want to be back where you were before? And if so, I think it still makes sense to be exploring opportunities in the interim in case your position is not reinstated at that time. But I think, if you do begin to explore opportunities, as much as possible, you want them to be opportunities that you're excited about, and you want to convey to the hiring manager or throughout the interview process that you are really excited about this opportunity, right? So I think one of the things that can sabotage your efforts while on furlough would be leading a hiring manager to believe that this is sort of your fallback. So as much as you can, really having strong language and being really clear about the fact that this opportunity is one that you're really excited about, that you have every confidence that you can make a contribution to this company, that this would be a great place, great fit for you and the company, and really having that certainty. I always really recommend authenticity in the hiring process. So I realize that this can create maybe some tension, because this opportunity may not be your first choice, right? Your first choice may be to go back to the role that could be there for you when the furlough ends. So you sort of have to balance that authenticity and honesty with still projecting excitement and enthusiasm about the role. And only you can feel through how that is right for you. But I think you do want to kind of find that balance.
And on the same spectrum, we'll keep following this spectrum because we got this question too. Is it smart right now to be job searching during this time if you already have a stable job?
So I think it is, if you are in a position in a company where you are feeling insecure and are not sure about the safety of your position long term, I think it is smart to begin networking conversations, to brush up your resume and cover letter, to work on your LinkedIn profile, all the things that you can sort of do to begin to explore what's out there. I think it makes sense to start looking at job boards, to start researching what opportunities may be out there. So I think it never hurts to be prepared. It certainly isn't a time to decide to resign before you have the next opportunity. My suggestion would very seldom be to do a resignation before you have your next opportunity lined up. But I think that period of exploration, the sooner you can start with that, the better, especially if you know that where you are is not where you want to be long term. So starting that process now is a great idea. I said earlier, there are companies that are hiring, and there are a lot of companies that see today's environment as an incredible opportunity to snatch up some of the greatest talent out there. So it is a time where places that are hiring, although they may be moving a little more slowly, are looking for really talented and skilled additions to their workforce. So I would say, sort of balance that work, that pre-work that you may be doing, that preparation you may be doing with, continuing to be able to, because right now I think in the time when you feel some sense of uncertainty in your current role, you want to be giving your all, right? So I know a job search can be incredibly time consuming. Many of us are working from home and have other demands. So you do want to be giving your all to your current role, especially if you are not in a position where you would like to lose that role. But you want to be also kind of spending some time to do that exploration and to get sort of the ball rolling in the meantime.
And as you're reaching out to people for informational interviews or during an interview process, what's a reasonable amount of time to follow up with someone if you haven't heard back?
Yeah, so I would say if you reach out to someone, say you reach out to someone on LinkedIn, you first have to send them a customized invitation to connect. Let's say they accept that invitation to connect, and then you send them a personalized message and say, I'd love to ask you 15 or 20 minutes of your time to just kind of have a conversation. I would say, after 2 weeks, I would politely go back and say, I know this is a busy time. If I could, if you think you have 15 or 20 minutes in the coming week, I'd love to get something on the calendar. So give it 2 weeks and then follow up again. I would try one more time. I think there's nothing wrong with persistence, and I am a firm believer that you shouldn't take it personally if someone doesn't respond to you. I think you tried, and you try again, and maybe you try one more time, and then just kind of move on. So I think there's nothing, especially if it's somebody who you really do believe could be an asset to you, who could be a great person to have in your network and a great person to have a conversation with. Keep trying. And then, if after 3 attempts, there's still nothing, just move on. I don't think, this is on the resources page, but I don't think I mentioned this during my prepared comments, but there is a website called Hunter, which allows you to sort of track your activity in a job search. And again, this is on the resources page. It also allows you to track conversations with folks that you're networking with. So one of the key things, we talked about follow-up maybe after 2 weeks and then again after 2 weeks. One of the key things I think that can be helpful is having a system that whatever you like, Excel spreadsheet, take a peek at Hunter. You may like having, sort of an online platform that allows you to sort of track your activity and kind of move your different activities in different buckets. It's a really interesting platform. Or, something else. You may just take handwritten notes or, whatever works for you. But keeping track of that outreach then allows you to keep following up and to know, if you do it on LinkedIn, you can see how many times maybe you reach out to the person, but Maybe you're sending emails as well to folks. That's never a bad idea either. If you reach out to someone via LinkedIn message and they don't respond, maybe you try reaching out to them via email on the contact email, through the contact email that they list on LinkedIn. Don't assume that everyone's on LinkedIn. When you're in an active job search, you may be on LinkedIn a lot. And you may assume that everyone is doing the same, and they may not be responding to you just simply because they're not in the habit of having LinkedIn up or checking things frequently, or maybe they don't have notifications that tell them when new messages come in. So, I think it's also a great idea to try different avenues for reaching out to them.
Yeah, great ideas. And, when all these days are blurring together in our current situation, it's helpful to have a system in place to remind us.
Absolutely.
Here's a question about when you're having those informational interviews or actual interviews online. Any tips on being confident? This person says that they find it hard to claim full credit for the projects that they've accomplished, and really highlight those in the interview process.
Yeah, so I think for me, when you're talking about individual accomplishments or achievements, especially in the interview process, and you're sort of telling a story about yourself, I encourage people to use what's called the STAR method, and you can find this just about anywhere. People talk about it all the time. The STAR method is situation, task, action, result. So situation is the setting, where were you? Describe the background information of the situation that you found yourself in. Task is what were you being given to do. So what was it that was put before you? Action is what did you do to tackle that thing that you were given? And then result is what came from it, right? So sometimes I think if we can have a framework for how we're going to set up telling the story, and we hit each one of those pieces, the natural result of telling that story is telling the result of the story, which is where the achievement often lies. Sometimes the achievement's in the middle part, right? Because it's about the way that you get there, the way that you get to the result, and that's the achievement itself. But I think if you sort of say to yourself, okay, this is the natural way of telling stories. It's not me bragging about myself or talking about myself in a way that feels uncomfortable to somebody else. It's just a natural path of storytelling. I think that can be really helpful. The other thing is, having a list of, attaways, right? So like if you have a manager, if you've gotten an email, if someone's given you feedback at some point, sort of having like a list, not to provide to potential employers or hiring managers, but just to remind yourself, to sort of give yourself a little reminder of, these are all the ways that people have told me that I've made contributions, or that I've stood out, or that I've done something meaningful for them. And referencing some of those in your story can be helpful. But even if you don't want to, even if you don't feel comfortable saying, my manager gave me this feedback and then I got this award or this accolade, even if that's not comfortable for you, having that reminder of the fact that that's something that you've done, and it's not up for debate, right? It's a tangible thing. And I think talking about that might be easier when you have those reminders.
Thank you. All right. Are cover letters important when applying for a job on LinkedIn?
So cover letters are another place where you'll get different answers depending on who you ask. There are times when cover letters are required. So then it's easy. If a cover letter is required, then you have to write the cover letter. And how much time gets spent on someone reading the cover letter is up for debate, but know that sort of a nice, brief, well-written cover letter that's written from the perspective of the person who's reading it. What do they care about? What's important to them? And really trying to hit on the things that they're telling you in the job description are important to them or what they need. So again, with a cover letter, the key is get inside the mind of the hiring manager, think about where the pain points are for them, right? They're telling you that somewhat in the job description. What do they need? What are they looking for? And finding ways to sort of solve those problems, answer those questions for them in your cover letter is key. Also, the cover letter being very, very customized and tailored, and showing that you have some understanding of the company itself. Both with cover letters and resumes, I always advocate for quality over quantity. Right? In the job search in general, quality over quantity. If it means you need to spend 20 minutes to a half hour to customize those documents, I'd rather see someone spend that time to do the customization instead of sending off 50 different cover letters and resumes that have not been tailored. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if a cover letter is not required, should you still write it? And I think the answer is maybe, if there's something that you want to say about your career journey that isn't implied or you can't really read from your resume or from your LinkedIn profile. Especially if you've had a change in your career trajectory, if you've changed paths a little bit, or if you're relocating, if there's sort of something that may stand out from the hiring manager's standpoint as a question mark that you want to tackle proactively and upfront, then a cover letter might be a good idea. If you do a really good job of customizing your resume and you have a really good LinkedIn profile, that might be sufficient for a lot of opportunities. So it really is, unfortunately, again, the answer is maybe, maybe not. But I think you sort of want to make that determination based on, so what I would say is, don't do a cover letter if it's just going to be a stock cover letter that you haven't spent the time to customize. I don't think that that is particularly helpful. If you really care about the opportunity and you want to take the time to tailor that document and to really tell a story, I think it can only help if it's a well-written cover letter. I do recommend, being sure that you have maybe another set of eyes to look it over and make sure that you don't make any grammatical or spelling errors, things like that. So sometimes if it's a sort of a small little, just like an error in the cover letter, it can sort of do more harm than good. So again, if you are going to do the cover letter, take the time to do it right, and be sure it's customized to the opportunity.
Great, thanks, Kim. Now, another sort of application question. We probably have time for 2 or 3 more questions. Do you think that a resume should always include job descriptions, or should it be more about your accomplishments?
Yeah, so I think in your experience section of your resume, when you're writing your professional experience section, you want to focus on really 2 different dynamics in your explanation of any given experience, right? Any given job role. The 2 key things are, number 1, can you give some really detailed and specific, and whenever possible, quantifiable metrics around what you did in a role and what you were able to accomplish? So can you get really sort of detailed and specific, and wherever possible, quantify what you've been able to do? And number 2, can you point to accomplishments and results that you've had in a given job role? So that can be, something like, was able to create and run this initiative that resulted in X%, growth in this area over this amount of time, right? So I do think when it comes to resume writing, the more your bullet points under your experience section can be specific and quantifiable and accomplishment or results based, the stronger that resume is. I think that's, we hear from hiring managers that that's really what they're looking for. Your experience section doesn't have to be a list of what you do every day, right? It doesn't have to be sort of a running list of everything you do when you get to the office in the morning, all the responsibilities. You know, it really should be the key things that you want the hiring manager to know, again, based on what they're telling you that they want in their job description. So the more those two things can tie together, the stronger the resume is.
And if you've been successful and you've done your due diligence during this strange time, how do you assess a role that you've never been to the office in person and that you've never personally met the interviewer or your future coworkers?
Yeah, so it's really hard. And what I would say is the more information you can gather, the better. And that would mean asking for the names of other team members or people who work, you know, adjacent to the team that you might be joining, and you know, asking if you can have 10 minutes to really, you know, ask them some questions that are like very culture based. You know, if you've gotten the job, if the offer's already been made, some of those questions about, you know, what is the office environment like? You know, is it, you know, on a daily basis, do people find time to get together and have a lot of collaboration and informal conversation? Do people get together outside of the office? You know, what kind of, how supported do you feel in terms of overall work-life balance? You know, all of those sort of little pieces that we take in when we go into, you know, an actual office facility. I think you can find ways to tease out those questions that you may be able to ask to team members. I think you want to seek out peers to ask those questions to, and not necessarily the hiring manager, because the hiring manager is selling you on the company and the role, right? So if they've made you the offer, they want you. And so they're going to say the things that are going to and, you know, be more inviting and more enticing to you to take the position. So I think that, you know, the part of the true test would be talking to peers who don't, you know, some of them may really be wanting you to join the team as well. They may have interviewed you too in the process. So the more you can sort of spread around, you know, your informal conversations, the better. Glassdoor provides some insight on companies. You know, I'm torn as to how reliable that information is. You know, it's just like Amazon reviews. You get the happiest and the unhappiest of people that tend to leave reviews and thoughts. So I think you sort of have to balance what you see on sites like that. I really believe that, you know, that's kind of secondary research. I really believe that primary research can be a lot more helpful in the process, which is like talking to real live people who, you know, will share their name and information with you. So I think, you know, that can be helpful. And then, you know, in many cases, you know, there is the possibility for, you know, whether it's like, you know, a lot of companies are doing like virtual tours of their, you know, some of it is like, is this an actual environment that I want to be working in, right? Like, do I want to be sitting at this cube? So some companies are doing some, you know, virtual tours of their workspace. You can always ask if that's a possibility. But every new position is a gamble, right? You never know going into a new job whether you're going to love it and whether it's going to be the right fit. And if you feel excited about the prospect and your intuition tells you it's a great fit for you, I think you have to sort of take a leap of faith and know that, you know, it's nothing's permanent, right, when it comes to your career. So if the time comes where, you know, remote work switches to live in-person, you know, office settings again, and you find that it is just a setting that is really doesn't work for you, then there are, you know, other opportunities.
Thank you so much, Kim. With that, that'll be our final question, but I just wanted to remind everyone, we will be sending around a list of the resources that Kim mentioned. If you haven't already had the opportunity to have that half-hour meeting with Kim, please feel free to reach out. A number of the resources that are both on that list and that Kim has mentioned this afternoon exist on the alumni career page. So please check that out, bentley.edu/alumni/career. And if you have any further questions, let us know. We hope to have more sessions virtually with Kim and others that address career service support for our alumni, family, and friends. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.